Our next guest is John Gollifer. John is the General Manager of the Investor Relations Society. Evening, John. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
So, start by telling us what is investor relations.
If you think of a marketplace, it's of course made up of many players, but for the sake of a definition, let's think of the company and the investment community. So investor relations, or IR, is essentially the two-way communication between the company and the investor. And while the investment proposition in itself is of course very important, the dialogue the other way is also important, because often investors can inform the strategic thinking of the company.
Okay, and what exactly is the role of what you do and what your organisation does?
I'm from the Investor Relations Society, and while the term investor relations has a relatively new connotation, or relatively recent given the IR Society is only 35 years old, as long as companies have existed, of course, they've always needed funds through investors. So whether it's called investor relations or something else, it's been around for a long time. But what the Investor Relations Society does is act as a focal point for IR professionals in the UK. And we do that in a variety of ways. We promote best practice in investor relations, given the operating and regulatory environment. And as part of that, we'll act on behalf of the companies who are members, most of the FTSE 100, many of the FTSE 250 and other companies, including from overseas, in, for example, public consultations, whether from regulators or elsewhere. So we'll act as the voice on behalf of the companies to ensure that regulators or other interested parties are hearing from our membership. As part of the professional body that is essentially run by IR professionals for IR professionals, we run two calendars, one for professional development training and the other for events, which culminates in a very large annual conference and a best practice awards dinner. And of course, part of that effort is the networking that we're able to create for our members. And we encourage them to form their own peer groups at different levels for different needs.
Okay, so what are some of the sort of basic rules of investor relations? What are they?
I'd like to think perhaps the most important is clarity. So from the business point of view or from the company's point of view, clarity of purpose, and as importantly, clarity of the investment proposition or the investment story. And part of that is being clear and consistent in good times as well as bad times. And of course, if you're able to do that and keep the market on side, including the investment community, you can add credibility to that. And often you'll need to go back to the market, either in good times or bad times. And if you've built up the relationships for the long term, just as any other good relationship with any other stakeholder, of course, you're more likely to be able to count on the investors, either as shareholders or prospective new investors.
Okay, and where can some of the young entrepreneurs that are on this show get some guidance and plan ahead for their IR requirements?
They're more than welcome to contact me directly, john.gollifer@irs.org.uk, or indeed go to the website irs.org.uk, see what we offer. If there's anything there of interest, please come to Coleman Street, just off Bank, and have a chat, and let's see where we go from there.
Okay, and is it for the smaller companies that we're dealing with? Is it appropriate to engage with IR at this earlier stage than pre-FTSE 250?
I think it depends. Clearly, companies go through life cycles, and I'd like to think that from a funding need, you can, of course, address different audiences. It could be debt investors, it could be equity investors, and at different stages of a company's life, it will need more money and it will need investors. So actually, as I said at the outset, whether we call it investor relations or anything else, the need's always been there for companies in raising capital, and the investment community's always been there. So I'd like to think that the principles apply to small as well as large companies. And of course, we're more than happy to share some of our experience with anybody that thinks it's relevant.
So when is your awards dinner?
That is on the 22nd of November this year. It's an annual event that brings together the whole community.
So who won the big IR Oscar last year?
There's 20 categories, so it'd be unfair to name one company in particular, but we do address from small to large size companies, so you are competing with peers rather than against the biggest, best known names.
Okay, fantastic. And how many members in the IRS?
750 and growing.
Okay. And they are, what percentage of those are UK businesses?
It would be predominantly UK, given that we're the professional body for the UK, but we have approximately 15% from overseas who've either chosen to see what principles and practice we follow in the UK, given how open and international the London marketplace is, or they have reason to be in the UK through trading or even a listing.
Okay, and just so we get an idea, the percentage of the effort, if you're doing an investor relations roadshow, are most people, is it about actually raising capital, or is it the lead up to raising capital and it's a relationship building thing, or is it evenly split?
I would say definitely the latter. Yeah. Although depending on where we are in the market cycle, of course you'll have new companies coming to market. But as I mentioned, I think the key is building the relationship for the long term. Relationships going into whatever stage you are, whether going public or otherwise, and relationships for when you really need them further down the road in your life cycle as a company.
Okay, wonderful. And so just let's tell us the website again so people can go there to get some guidance.
www.irs.org.uk.
No relation to the US IRS.
That's a very good question, and horribly confused and completely ignore that acronym and think of us as the Investor Relations Society.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. That was John Gollifer, who is the General Manager of the Investor Relations Society here in London, just down the road in fact. You have the web address and some very useful information there. Thank you very much for joining us, John.